Bien. Eh bien, nous allons maintenant accueillir le Premier ministre.
Well, we will now welcome the French Prime Minister, Mr. Edouard Philippe.
Bonjour.
Ah oui.
C'est bien pour ça que...
Yes. It is impressive. Why did you come to CHAM? I'm wondering that myself. Why did I come? Hello, everyone. And I'm very impressed by this room. I apologize to the people who I'm turning my back to. There are screens. Why did I come? For at least two reasons. Those who work with me must have considered that after spending an evening on a TV, in a TV station last night, it would be nice to do the same thing in Chamonix. I'd like to thank them for that. And more seriously, I've been told that this is an exceptional meeting because of the quality and the diversity of the debate and the people present. But the question of health is a question that is central to many of our societal questions today and our ability to transform current society. So talking about them with you, when we're coming up with a health system transformation plan with Agnès Buzyn and with the President of the Republic, it seemed like a good idea to me. It's remarkable, yes. Always the same voices speaking to say nothing. It's full of pixels. I'm going to bring myself to 2022 now. We're Friday, September 30th, 2022. You're my doctor, Dr. Philippe. I'm your patient. I have a bit of diabetes, a bit of hard of hearing. You know me because we go to the market together. And I'm saying, doctor, how are things working now? Are you happy with the system that was set up by the Prime Minister, Edouard Philippe, in 2018? Are you satisfied? Are you happy with the environment that you're working in and the organization of care in general? Well, I would deduce a certain number of things. In September 30, 2022, that's not very much time. I'm saying that jokingly to the doctors, but there is an element there that's quite sensitive. That's the question of training, and the question particularly of initial training, and the ability that some people will have who have started their studies not necessarily to become doctors, that will become doctors, and that's a major transformation in our system. That won't concern me, of course, but it is something that's quite interesting and fundamental, and we won't see the effects of that in 2022. It's too early. It's a bit frustrating to think that we're working for much later, but that is part of it. Secondly, the second consequence of your question is I won't be Prime Minister anymore. I'll be a doctor. I'm not sure that medicine has anything to gain from that. Maybe politics will. Will it be better? I hope. And I'm serious now. I hope that in 2022, practicing medicine and being a doctor, regardless of where they're practicing in a hospital or a private practice, I hope that the difference won't be so great as it is today anymore. I hope it will be easier. Easier, well, firstly, I'd like to say a word. Basically, and I say this with a lot of certainty, but I'm not a doctor, I'm not a specialist in the field. What I understand is that regardless of the transformations in the organization, regardless of technological transformations, there's a part that is essentially linked to the nature of the doctor's activity, of of treating people. There's a human aspect. There's a mix of science and intuition, an ability to understand and explain, to adapt to cases that are individual, but that also deal with the groups. It's not because we've changed the health system that technology will help cure, and that technology won't have changed radically by 2022. It might be the opposite, but that's what I think. Secondly, what we would like is that in September 30, 2022, that the transformations that we have begun will allow the person who is a doctor to dedicate or to devote more time to practicing medicine. It's one of the elements of the transformation plan that we're proposing. How can we ensure that doctors are devoting themselves to practicing medicine and not to other things? And if in 2022 you want to make an appointment with me, I hope that the medical assistant that I will have hired and financed through the medical insurance system will have taken over a lot of administrative tasks for me, and that will allow me to devote more of my precious time to treating my patients than doing paperwork and other things. I hope that you'll go well besides your diabetes and your hearing problems and your poor hip. But if you need to see your doctor, I hope that in 2022 we'll have encouraged doctors to group together more, and that isolated private practices will have become dangerous. No, I'm not saying dangerous. I'll say dangerous. The Prime Minister is not saying dangerous. He says, I prefer that you say it. If you say it, that's an opinion. If I say it, people will wonder why I'm saying that. But we're trying to imagine a system in which isolated practice will no longer be the normal situation. It would be surprising. We want to ensure that we can organize medicine and allow private medicine to organize itself, rather, so that organizations will allow a better connection with the hospital, will allow a better treatment of people with non-programmed care, and this requires the grouping together of doctors. And then I hope that we'll have made a lot of progress, the progress that we hope that we've been talking about for a long time now, the sharing of personal data amongst professionals. That's not perfect yet. It's far from perfect. It doesn't exist yet, to be honest. Well, okay. In 2022, will we have made progress, significant progress? I hope so. Well, you can't just hope. You have to be sure. Yes, I try to express myself in a very prudent manner, but that doesn't mean that I'm not very determined. I've seen the opposite so often. So it seems like you're bringing the private and the public world together. In our current system, we had a long leg and a short leg, so it was hard to run together. And similarly for insurance, we have a very complicated system. We have all of the different levels, insurance, complementary insurance. It's just a pile of dung, as he's saying. So you're balancing out both legs in the plan, and we hope that we'll see private doctors working together more with the clinics and the hospitals, and we'll be here really to care for the patients properly, to take care of Mr. Philippe. I hope so too. But because I'm a realist, I know that we're attacking something difficult. When we say on paper that we want to organize hospital medicine and private practice and to bring the private and public sector together, it's rare that people say that, oh, we shouldn't try to work well together. Of course, people want to work well together. But once that's said, and I can testify to this as the former mayor of a city where we had a public hospital and private clinics and private practice, the ability to get these different stakeholders to work together in a complementary way rather than a competitive way, that's difficult to do in detail. It's quite a sporty venture. So we can't be satisfied with the current situation, and we need to go on the path that you've described. I've no doubt about that. No doubt at all about the fact that today we're not able to find the solution to our problems because, well, for many reasons, but the link between the world of hospitals and private practice is insufficiently structured or organized or fluid. And I've observed this, that you have a type of difficulty in accessing doctors for non-programmed interventions. So our ERs are full because the general practitioners can't accept the patient. So we need to rethink this. I'm not giving out any lessons, and I'm not pretending to be a specialist, but I'm struck by this. I was the president of the hospital at Le Havre, and each time I went to the ER, I saw that they were clogged because it's a symptom of all of the upstream and downstream problems. There's an embolism in the ER, and in order to solve that, we need to deal with the upstream and downstream aspects. I don't mean hit on them. He said we need to hit them. We need to devote a lot of energy to make sure it works. So I'm sure of that. I'm certain of that. We need to change the meshing in the regions and to change medical practice outside of hospitals to make sure that we can take a small emergency cases, that we can also work with telemedicine. Telemedicine won't solve everything. We know that, but it can help. It does. It can contribute in a lot of regions. It works. It's possible. It was poorly taken into account in the financing and reimbursement system. We need to do this. This goes hand in hand with the digital equipping of our regions, but it's possible, and it's an element of the solution, notably in the most isolated regions. And I'm going to really focus on this in the health system transformation plan. I'm convinced that in this field, like in all fields of public action, that a single measure won't produce the effect that we need. When we have a systemic problem like this, the one of medicine in France, if we want to improve it, we have to hit it from all sides. We need to solve the problems one by one, but at the same time. That's what we're trying to do in this plan. That's why it has that pixel aspect that you were mentioning earlier. The image is correct, because that's what we're trying to do. We saw that, and it's interesting. In my professional life as a doctor, I've never seen a plan that reviews the entire system together. We've had hospital plans, some other subsidies or things for GPs, but just a little bit. But we've never looked at the holistic approach. But we have a concern. What you've started, we really buy into it, but we're afraid of seeing it crumble down under the administrations that are going to block it with all the decrees. We're panicking. Mr. Prime Minister, we're terrified. I took my phone, I made some calls. 200 files were sent to the ARS. A lot of people have been mobilized, private practitioners and hospital doctors. They went to the regional health authorities. You have a big council in your central committee. And there are 200 others on the financial side. And I learned that a team wanted to launch their file, and they said that there would be 10 meetings in Paris. And you live in Brive. You're a surgeon, and you have to go to 10 meetings in Paris. They'll never go. So how can we make sure that the men and women be involved? Can we go from the precautionary principle to the principle of responsibility that involves making mistakes and gaining experience? If we don't, we won't succeed, and this is shared by all of the stakeholders in the field of health. Tell us what you think. We need to hear you without going into details. But how are you going to do this? Are you going to just go from region to region? Or are you going to try to liberate and modify the regional health centers? Or what can you say? How can you reassure us? So with this question, we've gone from the design to the execution. Yes, indeed. Yes, serious question. I didn't miss it. We've gone from design to execution of the project, and in public policy and in reform and in major transformations that we're planning, it's just as important. And it's often a field in which the politicians invest themselves less, which is understandable because they're here to embody transformation, and then the implementation is given more to the technicians and less to them. I'm not pardoning them, but because execution is as important as the design, so we should be working on it as much. But let's look at this now in detail. I have two comments. The first, which is a concern or a point of extreme attention from the minister and from myself, prior to the production of the health transformation plan, and I observe quite happily and pride that it was well received generally by the people who know the topic well. I'm not saying everyone agrees about everything, but we've had good responses. Prior to its production, there was a strong concern, sometimes formulated as desperation. How will this go? And this was mostly in the hospitals. And they were just waiting. Since they knew something was happening, they had this desperation and then a bit of hope. Each time I met with hospital staff since we announced the plan, I talked about this last night on TV. I went to the hospital at Aulnay-sous-Bois. It was hard. I'm not going to hide that. It was a difficult experience. And when you talk with the main stakeholders that are concerned, the doctors, the nurses, they say, okay, the plan's not bad. We'll see, but it looks pretty good. We see that coming back to the tariffication based on medical acts is a better way of working. So they were happy about certain things, except now that they said, now that you said that, you have to do it. And this plan that's going to be complicated to implement tomorrow morning will change nothing for me. And that's true. It will take time. That's a fact. So we went from a type of attentive desperation to a type of impatience on, okay, now you have to deliver. And from the point of view of hospital management and management by politicians of these topics, it's not necessarily easier. And it requires a lot of attention. That's my first comment. My second comment is that I understand the concerns concerning the heavy procedure that could be invented to validate or manage, authorize the projects, and the over-recentralization that could occur. We talked about this with Olivier Véran earlier. I don't know where he is. There he is. You're right. He's to my left. And I said with Olivier, who's right on that point, that in truth, a lot of procedures that were set up in the framework of the finance law last year, the healthcare plan financing last year, are characterized by a will to be more flexible and more sober than is the usual. I'm not sure if you share that observation. It would be interesting to talk about it with him, but we were quite sensitive to that. So I understand we have to be very careful about how we roll these measures out. A second thing I understand is that the profession, not the entire profession, but part of the heads of the regional health authorities, their roles will change. We're going to have to go from an activity that's essentially, I'll say this in a very careful way, where the regulatory aspects were very important, to a profession in which they're going to have to coordinate or let organizations develop and become more operational and efficient in such and such area. And there's very little chance that this exact same solutions be intelligent for Chambéry or Annecy and in Le Havre and Cherbourg. So we could imagine that there would be differences. So the ARSs, the regional health authorities, have to succeed in that transformation, and we need to support them. Not everything is on the shoulders of the heads of these authorities. So we need to work on this reorganization. When we look, they are regional health authorities that control, and they say, great, it's great what you're doing. So it's not reproducible. You can do it. So we don't have to work on a national level. You said it yourself. We need to let the locals and regionals do their job.
So you would be in agreement with it. We have to be guarantors. We need to let the players play and just to raise the yellow card, the red card, and sometimes, hopefully, we've got players scoring goals. So we're a bit lost, if you like. Okay. This is our feeling. Yes, I understand. I could also say something else without being too provocative, hopefully, because I am in an inferior position. I think there are many areas where we've been waiting for things. We've been waiting for organizational expertise to be implemented, where there have been people, and we were not impressed either. Yes, you're right. You're right. And especially given that when you look at the reorganization of the system, given what you've said, there are projects that are not that costly. Just getting something into circulation, getting a network up. It doesn't mean hours and hours in an office. Far from that. We can let local stakeholders do things. Yes, I've got Dr. Philippe who's with me in case I cough too much. Yes, how are you going to go about things then? You've got some remarkable initiatives. I've seen some of them. I'm shown what's good or what's bad when I go around and make visits. But I've seen in areas, I've seen some achievements, some original achievements in certain areas, some exceptional things. There's one that really impressed me in the Cher. It wasn't exactly in a dense metropolitan area, let's say. There was a grouping that was very flexible, based on a voluntary approach. So these things exist with the instruments that already exist. It's not impossible. You've got the initiatives of elected officials who are sometimes given support. So So there is this experience of elected officials. When elected officials help projects, they support the projects implemented by medical professionals, things work. When elected officials design the projects and then try and find people to implement them, the medical professionals to implement them, it doesn't work quite as well. And sometimes it just, the health center remains empty. Yes, but there have been some great initiatives in terms of organization. Yes, we don't hear enough about such things. They remain secret. Given the time remaining, if you will, I would like to talk about something else, the challenges of artificial intelligence, genomics, what we're seeing across the world. Whereabouts is France? What can you tell us about this subject? We've got some major difficulties. We've got lots of startups, but we haven't seen any startups with worldwide recognition yet. We've got American companies that are only 20 years old that are doing very, very well. There's a startup, a worldwide startup like Facebook or Google. I don't know any European startups like this. So we're small, 76 million. This is what Nicolas was saying this morning. If we don't play on a European scale with our market, what's going to happen? We're all wondering about that here today. Tell us what you feel about this subject. Well, my feeling is that, well, I'm not a specialist, and I'm seeing what's happening. I'm trying to understand. I'm interested in it. It's the feeling of an honest man. I'm trying to understand because sometimes I have decisions to make. And it's crazy. It's incredible. The progress, the transformations that are envisaged, sometimes they're already there, they exist. Those who experience this on a day-to-day basis, it might appear natural for them, but for me, I'm absolutely struck by these things when I hear about them. I'm not frightened about them, but I can understand that some people are. And I think that already we should try and explain what the stakes are. That would help on data processing, artificial intelligence associated with medicine or research. We need to talk more about other questions, biotics, the search for transforming the genome. I'm not saying that as a spectator. I'm saying that as somebody who's seeing these transformations and who's saying to themselves, things are going very fast, things are going very far, and they involve a lot of questions. Secondly, there's also the effect of production capacity in terms of the participation in this exercise. There's a scale effect. 76 million, that's good, but we're smaller than China. And according to different hypotheses, even in 2022, we won't really have changed that figure very much. So the right scale for us is the European scale. It's already not very big, Europe. But perhaps we can compensate this scale, this size, with a kind of density of intelligence and data that is probably exceptional. I know that you've been talking about this in the other round tables. I don't have anything more intelligent to say than what's already been said. In fact, what I have to say is probably not as smart. But clearly, it's true for this and other subjects. If we want to weigh in against North America and against the Chinese bloc, well, the solution is exclusively European. That's my feeling. That's my conviction. In this field, along with other fields. Seems that we have a number of instruments that are sometimes quite original. We can concentrate data. We've got programs that we've developed, programs focusing on research. I can't remember the programs, the names, so my colleagues obviously know them off by heart, so they're going to be telling me off. I'll have to look at my sheet of paper. Now, today, I've got sheets of paper. Today. So, France Medicine Genomics 2025. Isn't that lovely? Isn't that a lovely title? No, let's be serious. What I want to say is that obviously we're not in the race for everything. There are certain areas where we're good. There's the scale effect, obviously, that has to be taken into account. And this means unions, alliances at European level. We've already heard this today. We didn't actually hear this from Natalie, the minister, because she was taken up elsewhere on urgent government business. But anyway, you know, Brexit. There we go. What else can we say? No. So we've got the best engineers. I'm sorry, but it is Friday evening after all. So we've got the best engineers, but they're being pinched. Hundreds of millions are being pinched. They're going out to the Pacific coast. In terms of investment, we're small. We've got 3 million from the investment bank. We need billions. How do we go about things? There are men and women who have small companies who want to become bigger, but how do we go about this? How do we free up the energies? How do we reduce constraints? How can we attract investors who have already wagered on 9 companies and they only have one that fructifies? So there's the question of public and private investments. Both actually count. There's the investment bank, the European Investment Bank, but a lot of money has been spent as part of investment plans. There are general plans as well. There's the genomic plan. There are the means of major research institutes. So there is public financing that is quite considerable. So I tend to think, and I'm saying it, that we can invest, we can devote now and tomorrow as much investment in strategic subjects, as much as as soon as we've organized public financing. This is not specific to medicine. I'm always fascinated by people who say when they compare budgets, the budgets of our neighbors, the Germans, they look at the ambitions and the priorities that are defined, and you know, they say, oh look, they're investing so much in that. Why? Well, because they've done something with their public financing. They've freed it up and they use it. Isn't that amazing? The problem is that to use them, you have to have them, and to have them, you have to create the public finances. So at the same time as we're trying to finance new policies, which is essential, of course, we've also got to organize things better. And we mustn't ever forget this. I mustn't forget this. And then there are private investments. There's the attractiveness of the French economy, of this sector that can be a sector that creates wealth. And we're talking about common law, developing the attractiveness of France, attracting investors. So this is what we said already. We need to make sure that procedures take less time. We mustn't shorten them too much, however. We need to make sure that drugs can get out quicker to the market, but safely, and then we can attract more capital in France and abroad. So I'm optimistic about this. I know that the development of foreign investment in France last year was considerable. France has always attracted foreign investment, but it's attracting more today. So we need to use that opportunity. And it's going to take us quite far. What you were talking about, the PME, if it can be developed in France, it's because there's exceptional workers, there are research institutes that are admirable. And so we've got attractiveness from that point of view. We can have more advantageous capital thanks to that. And now sometimes things go wrong, but it doesn't matter. It's when you succeed that we know that it's worth it. So we've got to take risks. We've got to assume those risks. There are risks being taken today. We're talking about the back law at the moment. There are a certain number of elements that are trying to encourage us to take risks and make sure that foreign investments are greater. So at the highest level, politicians have promoted the biggest projects. General de Gaulle, for example, voted a law in the 60s, and then the plan was crushed under Giscard because there was a fight. Chirac and Schröder took over, and then there was the anti-Google. There was the European Google. So there were projects that were started. The plan was stopped. The project was crushed because people didn't want to talk to each other. When are we going to make sure that people talk to each other and get on? I'm sorry, Professor, but what you've just defended, you've just talked about startups. Why should things be different in the public sector? You've said that there are subjects that work and some that don't. Of course, you're right to talk about certain failures. It's a nuisance, it's annoying, but there have also been success stories. Yes, but from this point of view, in terms of robotics and genomics, look at the little robot. The Americans bought it. There's another French company that has an exceptional medical project with respect to the carte vitale, the patient's card, and they don't have enough investors. 500,000 euros, but they can't find 50 million euros to speed up the process. So these are the companies that I work with. Who is daring enough? We are not entrepreneuring enough. We're not the same as the Americans who risk things all the time. People, they just said, get it wrong fast, and you will learn. So I'm going to be careful about what I respond, how I respond. So I find that you are being severe. Severe, yes. I find that you are rather severe in your approach, because I see a lot of French entrepreneurs who believe and who succeed. Perhaps not with everything, but not as much as we would like them to. But they are showing us that it's possible. So I think we've got to be pragmatic, and we've got to see where there are blocking points. And if somebody can't find 50 million in terms of investment, well, this is sad, because there are funds that can invest in France. There are lots. So there are lots. I'm sure of that. Okay. Well, time is ticking, so perhaps it's time to talk to us about what you think about the future of the healthcare system. You talked about it in the beginning. What kind of hope can you give us? Well, hope. Well, what can I say? Maybe you might see this as pride, and I assume it. I am absolutely sure that we can deeply and durably repair all of the things that are not working in the healthcare system today. I'm absolutely convinced of this. We've got a system that's very much marked by an organization that was thought up in the past. Times change. We've got everything we need in terms of the quality of men and women, organization, general interest, as expressed by doctors when they're treating patients or people in administration. I'm sure that we can solve the problem. It means we have to look at it in the eyes. It means we have to devote means. It means that we have to do it with a kind of coherence that is lasting. And basically, that's the most important thing. I can't really go into the details of the machinery and how it's all going to be done. But when we want to succeed at deep-reaching transformation, when we want to lay the foundations and be coherent over time and in space, this is what you need. Everything that we do in the coming years in relation to healthcare has to be in line with the foundations that we had in the plan. Everything. And we need to implement this plan over time. It needs to last. And this loops back to the second question that you asked me. I think it's so important that I prefer that not to become a doctor in 2020, but to make sure instead that we can continue to implement this plan durably. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Merci. Merci beaucoup. Vraiment, merci. Voilà.